what a man thinks when he sees that your dignity is stronger than your love for him isn't pretty, it isn't tender, and it isn't pleasant. It's devastating to his ego, because here he doesn't just lose affection, he loses position. This video doesn't exist to comfort you or inflate your self-esteem. It exists to show you the exact psychological mechanism that activates when he discovers he can no longer have you at any price. And when that happens, nothing feels the same for either of you anymore. Here you'll hear the 6 real mental stages his mind goes through when your dignity prevails, from the initial confusion to the inner breakdown, all the way to the point where the dynamic reverses forever. If you leave before the end, you'll miss the most dangerous and decisive part, the one that separates the woman who gives in again from the woman who will never be taken for granted again. This isn't just any content. It's the message you need to hear in full if you don't want to lose yourself for love again. Carl Jung warned that no one confronts another human being without first confronting their own shadow, and that's exactly what happens here. Your dignity forces him to see what he'd been avoiding. Everything we're about to discuss, the moment you stop being negotiable, dignity that becomes structure rather than hardness, the return to yourself, I've gathered and organized step by step in a book. It's called The Art of Detachment, How to Reclaim Your Power When Someone You Love Pulls Away. It's not a manual of techniques to win someone back. It's a guide to stop betraying yourself in small ways and return to your center, even when it's scary. If these words are landing for you, the complete journey is waiting. You'll find the link below in the description. When you're ready, it's yours. If any of this is already resonating, subscribe and write, "I hear you," in the comments. That way YouTube understands this reflection deserves to go further, because if you hear this at the right moment, it won't just change your mood, it'll change the inner structure from which you love. First step, the moment he realizes you're no longer negotiable. Listen carefully, because here a very common fantasy breaks. A man doesn't notice he's losing you when you leave. He notices when he can no longer move you internally. It's not a sentence, not an announced boundary, not an emotional scene. It's a silent shift in your inner position, and when it happens, he perceives it long before he can put it into words. I want to make this concrete with a real case. Christabel came to counseling with a story that repeats more often than you'd imagine. Affectionate, deep, committed. She didn't beg, didn't chase, didn't make scenes. From the outside, anyone would say she had dignity. But internally, she negotiated in silence, justified absences, waited too long, endured small inconsistencies so as not to be inconvenient, until something changed. Not outside, but within. And that movement triggered the first real break in his mind. For years, Christabel confused patience with mature love. She thought understanding meant yielding, that adapting meant caring. And without realizing it, she taught her inner system and his that her space could expand without breaking. Every long wait, every lukewarm response, every accumulated its fine formed a silent dynamic. There was no malice, but there was also no growth, because when you adapt too much, the other never feels the urgency to get himself in order. And this is felt even when it's not said. The break didn't arrive with a slammed door or tears. It came the day Christabel stopped over-explaining herself. Something didn't sit right with her, and she no longer justified it. Something irritated her, and she no longer swallowed it. She didn't leave, didn't threaten, didn't complain. She simply stopped betraying herself in small things. This gesture, as invisible as it was radical, reconfigures everything. Because when you return to yourself, your energy stops asking, stops adapting so the other won't leave. And this is felt as an immediate loss of access. Here appears the first male mental reaction. It's not fear yet, it's discomfort. He doesn't understand what's changed. He only feels that something isn't reacting the same way anymore. Your silence weighs differently. Your boundaries don't sound defensive. Your presence no longer offers itself as before. And this forces him to observe, not to take care of you, but to reposition himself. Because when a woman stops being negotiable without announcing it, the man encounters a new sensation. The dynamic he took for granted is no longer guaranteed. Jung would say that at this point, the shadow is activated, that part of the psyche that reacts when it loses emotional control. Not domination, access. He doesn't think I'm going to lose her. He thinks something deeper. I no longer understand from what position to relate to her. Before, when Christabel left, he lost a woman. Now when she leaves, he loses a comfortable inner position. And that unsettles more than physical absence. Because love can be replaced. Embodied dignity cannot. It's important you see this clearly. This doesn't happen when you leave. It happens when you make 3 inner movements. You stop staying where your body tenses to maintain the relationship. You stop explaining yourself to someone who isn't willing to listen. You begin making small decisions that align with you, even if the other doesn't like them. Not to provoke, but to respect yourself. When you do this, you don't become cold, you become clear. And clarity is profoundly intimidating to someone who is comfortable in your emotional ambiguity. The man begins to measure, observes timing, words, reactions. Not because you're manipulating him, but because you've stopped manipulating yourself to make him stay. Here his fantasy breaks. She's always there. And when that certainty falls, his mind goes on alert. It's not love yet, it's recalibration. because no one appreciates what seems unconditional, but everyone appreciates what has quiet boundaries. This is the true beginning of psychological respect. Many women believe dignity is hardness. No, dignity is inner coherence maintained over time. Christabel didn't become distant, she became whole. And that activated a dangerous question in him. What place do I occupy now? You're no longer reaction, you're presence. You no longer chase, you choose. And this constant choosing, without words, disarms every dynamic based on comfort. There's no punishment here. There's structure. And structure orders more than any declaration of love. This step is silent, but irreversible. Because once your system learns it doesn't have to strain to love, it can never go back. He feels this even if he doesn't name it. He knows something has changed, that he can no longer count on your emotional flexibility. And this forces him to define himself, grow or withdraw. Both options arise from the same point. You'll return to yourself. Not from an external threat, but from an inner integrity that is no longer negotiable. I want you to hold this phrase as an anchor, because it changes the entire game. I don't have to leave to stop being negotiable. I have to return to myself. When you integrate this, the bond stops holding itself together by inertia, and the male mind, losing comfort, begins to compare. Not you with the past, but with any other woman who doesn't embody this level of coherence. And there, something even deeper begins. Why does your dignity activate more respect than all the love you've given? Second step. Why your dignity activates more respect than all the love you've given together. It hurts, but it liberates. Love, when it has no structure, becomes landscape. It's there, it sustains, but it doesn't order. What truly reorganizes a man's mind is the inner form from which you love. When you love without abandoning yourself, when you don't shrink to fit, he can no longer read you from comfort, and this silent, steady shift weighs more than any emotional promise you made before. The common mistake is believing that giving more love generates more commitment. No, it generates more habit. Dignity, on the other hand, introduces a new variable, consequence. Not punishment, not coldness, coherence. Jung explained that the psyche respects what has contour. When you have clear inner boundaries, the other perceives there's something he cannot cross without transforming himself. And that generates respect even before desire, because now he doesn't possess you emotionally. He must position himself before you. Here, an unconscious comparison happens. He begins making contrasts. He doesn't verbalize it, but he feels it. Your current presence versus the past version that always adapted. Your calm versus your old waiting. And this comparison generates inner tension, because before, your love was guaranteed. Now your access isn't. And when access stops being certain, the male mind enters evaluation, not romantic, strategic. Do I rise or lose this position? This question marks a before and after. Many women think this is manipulation. No, it isn't. Manipulation would mean changing to provoke a reaction. Here you don't change for him, you change for coherence with yourself. And this is felt differently. Your energy no longer pushes, doesn't ask, doesn't adapt. It simply is. And this stable presence without effort disarms more than any speech, because he can no longer lean on your emotional flexibility to stay the same. Now he must grow or feel uncomfortable until he leaves. In counseling, this point appears in their confused phrases. I don't know what's happening to me. I perceive her differently. Before it was simpler. Simple isn't love, it's access without consequences. And when that is lost, something new appears, real attention. Not always healthy, not always mature, but finally attention. Because your dignity has forced his system to wake up, not from fear of losing you physically, but from the sensation of losing in an inner position that gave him security without effort. This is where many women doubt and take a step back. When he starts approaching differently, measuring, being more attentive, the temptation to yield again appears. And there, everything is decided. Because if you use your dignity as a strategy, it dilutes. But if you maintain it as identity, it solidifies. Jung would say this is the moment when the bond stops being projection and becomes conscious choice, and not everyone is ready to choose from there. Your dignity doesn't guarantee he'll stay. It guarantees something more important, that you won't lose yourself. And paradoxically, that's what has the most impact, because you no longer move from fear of losing him, you move from respect for your inner axis. And this emotional autonomy shifts the balance. He's no longer the evaluator. Now, he's the one who must figure out if he can rise to the level of coherence you embody without announcing it. This respect isn't born from sacrifice, it's born from boundaries. Not from drama, but from maintained calm. When you don't react from the wound but from clarity, he can no longer play at the same level as before. And this makes things uncomfortable, but it also awakens. Because dignity doesn't seduce like attachment does, but it leaves a trace that doesn't erase easily, not even when the relationship ends. You become the inner reference, not the romantic memory. I want you to see this without idealizing. Some men grow in the face of this, others withdraw. Both results are coherent. What changes is that you no longer negotiate your center to hold on to someone. And when your love arises from there, it stops being a constant offer. It becomes shared choice. This is the difference between being desired and being respected. And the male mind, even if it doesn't admit it, always knows when it's facing the latter. Third step, when respect transforms into silent fear. Not the childish fear of losing you, the adult fear of not measuring up. Here the male mind enters contradiction. He wants to approach but fears exposing himself. He seeks you then withdraws. Not because he's playing games, but because his identity is reorganizing. Your dignity forces him to look at himself without the cushion of your availability, and that activates an inner anxiety, even if outwardly he shows calm or distance. This fear doesn't express itself with clear words. It appears as ambiguity, lukewarm messages, intense gestures. He's testing if you're still there, but not from the same place. And when he realizes you don't react like before, that you don't chase or complain, the unease grows. Because now he can no longer regulate himself through your emotional reaction. Jung would call this a confrontation with the true self without masks, and not everyone knows how to bear that inner gaze. Many women misinterpret this moment. They confuse intensity with progress, believe that intermittent closeness is a sign of emerging love. Not always. Sometimes it's just a system trying to regain control. Your task isn't to decode it, but to remain steady. If you don't move from fear, if you don't fill the voids, he finds himself facing something new, his own emptiness. And this encounter can transform him or push him to flee. The important thing is this. Listen to it calmly. Your dignity doesn't accelerate processes, it reveals them. If he approaches from presence, you'll feel it. If he approaches from fear, you'll feel that too. The difference lies in stability. Love born from fear needs constant proof. Love born from respect seeks coherence. And you, by not abandoning your center, become the natural filter that distinguishes one from the other without saying a single word. At this point, the dynamic has already begun to reverse. Before, you were the one measuring time, words, gestures. Now it's him. He observes whether you're still available, whether something loosens, whether you go back to adapting. And when you don't, an uncomfortable but revealing sensation appears. He no longer has you secured. Not because you're leaving, but because you're no longer dependent. It's this emotional independence that reorganizes, more than anything, his perception of value. Jung affirmed that authentic desire is born when the other cannot be possessed, only encountered. Your dignity removes you from the position of emotional object and returns you to that of subject. And this changes the gaze. You're no longer the one who's always there. You're the one who chooses to be there. This difference seems subtle but completely transforms the experience of the bond, because now he no longer relates to your dedication but to your conscious presence. This is a delicate phase for you too, because if he shows fear or confusion, it can reawaken your old role, reassure, explain, support. Here is where it's decided whether your dignity is identity or strategy. If you give energy back to the bond, the system returns to the familiar. If you maintain yourself, something new installs itself, not from coldness, but from inner coherence. And this coherence begins to require from him a clearer position. Some men at this point rise, they become more present, more emotionally responsible. Others weaken, not because you did something wrong, but because the bar has been raised. And dignity doesn't negotiate altitude. You don't push, don't threaten, you simply don't descend. And this redefines the bond without confrontation, because true respect isn't imposed, it's embodied. And when it's embodied, it can no longer be ignored. I want you to observe something important. When he begins to change, it's not because you convinced him, it's because your integrity put him face to face with himself. And when he doesn't change, it's not a failure, it's information. Your dignity saves you years of confusion. It shows you who can meet you at the level you're at and who could only love you when you made yourself smaller. This clarity hurts at first, but liberates in the long run. Fourth step, the moment he realizes there's no going back. The version of you that waited, that adapted, that yielded just to maintain things, she's not coming back. And this certainty doesn't arrive with a conversation. It arrives with an irreversible inner sensation. He can no longer provoke the same reaction in you. He can no longer count on your emotional availability. Something has closed, not from resentment, but from coherence. And when this happens, his mind stops testing and begins deciding from a deeper place. Here appears a silent mourning. He's not crying over your physical absence. He's mourning the loss of a dynamic that gave him security without effort. And this hurts more than you imagine, because confronting a woman who doesn't back down forces him to accept his own limits. Jung defined this point as the death of a projection. You no longer carry his voids, and when the projection falls, only two paths remain: mature or withdraw emotionally. If he decides to stay, the way he looks at you changes, no longer from comfort, but from conscious respect. He begins to regulate himself, to take emotional responsibility, to measure what he offers. Not from fear of losing you, but because he understands he cannot keep you from the same level. Your dignity has raised the standard without demanding it, and this movement redefines the bond. You're no longer refuge, you're encounter. And not everyone knows how to love from there. If he decides to go, even the closure is different. There's no persistent drama, no eternal back and forth. There is a clear sense of inner boundary. You don't chase explanations, don't try to convince, and this leaves a trace. Because even if he leaves, he carries with him an impossible-to-erase reference, that of a woman who did not negotiate her access for love. This image returns later, when other dynamics no longer suffice. This point is decisive for you because here doubt usually appears. Was I too rigid? You were coherent. And coherence is never excess. Love that survives only if you make yourself smaller isn't love, it's dependence. Your dignity didn't destroy anything precious. It only revealed what couldn't sustain itself at your level. And even though it hurts to let go, something in you begins to rest. There's no more constant tension, no more silent self-abandonment. Jung would say that here your true individuation begins. You no longer define yourself by being chosen, but by choosing yourself. And this identity transforms all your future bonds, because now you don't love from lack, you love from presence. You don't seek to be enough, you already are. And this energy changes the way others approach, not from demand, but from recognition. Your dignity becomes the natural filter. This step marks the definitive before and after. It doesn't matter if he comes back or not. You never return to the version that waited for crumbs. And that's the real gain. Because now you know you don't need intensity to feel valuable, nor promises to stay. Your calm becomes home. And from there, only those who know how to inhabit it without trying to disturb it to feel superior can enter. Many men remember this type of woman, not with romantic nostalgia, but with late respect. Because she was the one who showed the limit they couldn't cross. And that limit, far from shutting them out, put them face to face with themselves. You didn't teach with discourse. You taught with embodiment, and that's what remains, when everything else dissolves with time. I want you to breathe here, because this isn't a point of hardness, it's a point of calm. You no longer have to sustain the unsustainable. You no longer have to translate yourself to be loved. Your dignity hasn't isolated you, it's ordered you. And when you're ordered within, the outside begins to respond differently. Not always quickly, not always simply, but always more authentically. Fifth step. When you integrate dignity as identity, not as a response to a wound. Here you no longer act from the past, you act from presence. Your decisions don't seek an effect, they seek coherence. And this is noticeable. Your yes has weight. Your no rests. There's no urgency to define anything because you're already defined from within. This stability changes the way others read you because there are no longer emotional cracks through which to enter to negotiate your value. At this point, love stops being a continuous test. You no longer need signals to feel secure. Your body is aligned with your boundaries, your word with your actions. And this congruence, so simple and so rare, becomes magnetic, not through seduction, but through clarity. Those who approach perceive it, and those who cannot sustain it withdraw without noise. Dignity doesn't argue, it orders the field. Here something subtle happens. You begin to notice you no longer hook into vague promises or intensity without direction. Your system recognizes the difference between presence and performance. This saves you time, energy, illusions. You don't become demanding, you become precise. And emotional precision is a language understood only by those ready to connect without games. The rest falls away on its own, without collision. Jung spoke of integration as the act of stopping fragmenting yourself to please others. That's what you do here. You no longer separate what you feel from what you allow. You don't negotiate your intuition to maintain a bond. And when someone tries to cross a boundary, your body reacts before your words. There's no anger, there's an elegant withdrawal. And this withdrawal, far from closing the heart, protects it. This is the point where many say, I don't attract the same type of people anymore. Exactly. Because you no longer transmit from lack. Your dignity changes the frequency. You no longer call in those who need to be held, but those who know how to hold themselves. And this doesn't guarantee quantity, it guarantees quality. Less noise, more truth. Less fear, more choice. Your love life doesn't simplify because you love less, but because you love yourself better. Here the memory of him loses force. Not because he wasn't important, but because he no longer occupies center stage. The center is you, and from there, the past orders itself without resentment. You're grateful for what you learned, and you move forward. There are no open accounts, there are inner closures. This is true liberation. Not when the other returns or asks forgiveness, but when you no longer need him to be at peace. This change is noticeable even in silence. You no longer explain your boundaries, no longer justify your decisions. You simply act in coherence, and this coherence becomes your new normal. Those who arrive late perceive it. There's no reproach, there's natural distance. Dignity doesn't build walls, it establishes thresholds. And only those who know how to cross them without invading enter. When you look back, you understand something important. You didn't lose love. You gained inner structure. And this structure is the foundation of every healthy bond. Without it, love overflows and wounds. With it, love contains itself and grows. Jung would say that here the bond stops being compensation and becomes true encounter. Two emotionally adult people who choose each other, not who need each other. This is the legacy of your dignity, not changing anyone, but moving yourself to another place, leaving the role of constant option and inhabiting that of conscious choice. And from there, everything reorganizes. Your relationships, your energy, your decisions. You no longer chase, you attract. You no longer fear losing. You trust your capacity to choose better. And now, at the closing of this cycle, remember this, because it contains everything that preceded it. Your dignity doesn't distance you from love. It brings you to the right one. It doesn't make you inaccessible, it makes you authentic. And when you're authentic, love stops being a struggle and becomes a home. From here, you don't go back. Because you no longer seek to be chosen, you choose yourself. Sixth step, when everything reconfigures from within. You no longer act from reaction, you act from identity. This is the point where dignity stops being a concept and becomes your natural way of being in the world. You don't ask yourself what to do so the other stays. You ask yourself if that bond honors what you are now. And this silent question guides every decision. There's no urgency, no fear. There's a steady calm that is no longer negotiable. Here something profound happens. Your nervous system learns that love doesn't have to hurt to be real. You no longer confuse intensity with connection, nor sacrifice with commitment. Your body recognizes when something is healthy and when it isn't. And this inner intelligence saves infinite explanations. You don't have to close cycles with words. You close them with coherence. And that coherence is felt even in your silence, even when you say nothing. Many men don't forget a woman like this. Not because she was perfect, but because she was whole. Because she didn't betray herself to be chosen. Because she showed, without speaking, what someone who respects themselves looks like. Jung said that what isn't integrated repeats itself. And you've broken the repetition, so you've become an inner point of reference for those who've known you. Not everyone recognizes it immediately, but everyone remembers. This is the point where love stops being a psychological game. There are no more tests, strategies, roles to maintain. There's presence, there's reciprocal choice. And if there isn't, there's still peace, because your value no longer depends on being desired, but on being faithful to yourself. This inner faithfulness is the foundation of every bond worth living. Without it, everything is negotiated. With it, everything is ordered. I want you to hear this with gentleness. Not everyone can love you from this level, and that's not a loss, it's a natural purification. Your dignity doesn't exclude, it filters. It lets in those who can sustain a relationship without depending on your self-sacrifice. And even though the path becomes more selective, it also becomes lighter. Less noise, less confusion, more truth. When you integrate all of this, you no longer look back with guilt, but with understanding. You understand why you yielded, why you waited, why you adapted, and you also understand why you can no longer do it. Not because you're hard, but because you've grown. And growing means letting go of old versions of yourself. This too is self-esteem, one that doesn't have to prove itself, only sustain itself. And Carl Jung spoke of individuation as the most courageous act of the human being, becoming what you truly are, even if it means losing bonds that existed only through dependence. You've walked this path, and in doing so, you've changed the way you love, choose, and allow yourself to be chosen. You no longer seek to complete yourself, you share from your fullness. This is the love that doesn't consume itself. If this message has reached you, stay a moment, like and subscribe. And if you want to take all of this with you, not as the emotion of a moment, but as an inner structure that remains, the book The Art of Detachment is there below in the description. It's the way to continue this journey when the video is over. Small gestures that grow this space together with you. And tell me in the comments which part touched you most. Because when we share from truth, YouTube favors what we choose together, and this type of reflection only reaches those ready to hear it. And don't forget this when you close the video. Your dignity isn't a barrier, it's a lighthouse. It doesn't chase love away, it orients it. And whoever comes toward you from now on will come knowing they cannot take you for granted, but they can find you through choice. That's the difference between a bond that consumes and one that sustains. Today you don't leave with techniques, but with an embodied truth. You don't have to prove your value or convince someone to stay. Your simple presence, aligned and steady, already says everything. As a final reminder, integrate it into a phrase that will accompany you from now on, because it defines your new place. I am the boundary that teaches how to truly love.